My name is Bhargavi, and I will be setting the context for arts-based therapy in the context of creativity, innovation, and mental health. The webinar that is planned for the next couple of hours. I would like to begin by sharing a little bit how I understand arts-based therapy from the work that I have been associated with in the Bapu Trust. For me, it links with the indigenous healing traditions found widely in India and in the Asia-Pacific regions. There was a question from one of the participants about whether spirituality is a part of this. Can we have spirituality as healing outside of formal religion? And for us, arts-based therapy is clearly that domain. Storytelling, as Firoza ma'am said, it's an ancient healing art form. It's been around for a long, long time. Oral traditions always had a mix of stories, myth and fantasies, metaphors and symbolism. All of them are healing elements. I'd like to also share a bit about our Maharashtra experience, which actually brought me into arts-based therapy healing practice. We visited about 21 dargahs, healing churches, Pentecostal churches. Then we visited a number of mandirs. And everywhere we went, we found the involvement of all forms of sensory experiences, including rhythm, song, chanting, use of voice, body movement, and color, fragrance. So it was a full embodied experience which blew open actually the senses. We largely tend to remain in the cognitive realm. So this was a big learning for us way back in 2001, 2002, something like that. And then we started really looking seriously at arts-based therapy as a form of working with communities, because this is the primary way, it seems, that we engage with ourselves, our families, our neighbors, our communities, and also in the process of working on this together as healing modalities. Arts-based therapy goes beyond cognition, language, and the rational way of the conscious mind. And it is in the twilight zone between being and knowing. And through the use of different art forms, often in integrated ways, we allow different realities and layers of to open up to us. And we experience our world in many different ways, which allows us choice to see what kind of world we want to inhabit in. And we've seen this work again and again in the different kinds of communities, persons with disabilities that we have worked with. Not to keep you away from your panelists for way too long, I would like to briefly introduce the panelists. For a full introduction, you may want to refer to the initial mailer, and it's also up on the website. Many of you will know Jerry Pinto, the renowned writer, editor, translator. I have read his novel M, though I missed the other one. The Big Boom, which won the crossword prize. That he's won many awards: the Hindu Literature Award, Literature for Life Award, the Sahitya Academy Award, while Murder in Mahim won the Valley of Words Award for fiction. I haven't read that either. Very interesting title. I'm going to claim this one. His latest novel, The Education of Yuri, has received universal acclaim. He's also won the National Award for Best Writing in Cinema and authored children's books and 2 books of poetry. Actually, Jerry, I did meet you, I think, 3 decades ago, and I've listened to some of your readings at the time, perhaps of your early poetry. So thank you for joining us today. It's really a great privilege to have you with us. Dr. Lakshmi Sankaran is Deputy Director, Training and Research at the Banyan Academy of Leadership in Mental Health, more popularly known as BAM. And she has a background in mental health education and documentation. She has a PhD in clinical psychology, and she served in several teaching positions as well as counseling in organizations, including prestigious ones like PTK Hospital, the Christ University, and so on. She's enjoyed developing manuals and curricula, for example, on de-addiction. And she has a diploma in arts-based therapy. And I'm proud to say she is an alumni of the Bapu Trust. And she has a certification in open dialogue. Thank you so much, Dr. Lakshmi. It's a pleasure to see you in this platform and to join you in the platform and be able once again to ask you questions and have you answer them. So thank you for joining us. Dr. Pattie Gonsalves is Project Director at Sangath, Goa. Many of you will know Sangath as a national organization working in mental health and working a lot with participatory approaches with young people. So they are innovators, and Pattie is involved in digital innovations on depression, anxiety, and suicide prevention. She brings expertise in engaging youth with lived experiences in program development, research, and advocacy. Pattie founded the It's Okay to Talk National Public Engagement Campaign. Well, we live a frog in the well kind of life in Pune. But we've heard of this campaign, It's Okay to Talk. So it's a very, very popular awareness program. She presently also leads Outlive, a suicide prevention program addressing urban youth suicides, and Baatcheet, a study focused on addressing depression and anxiety among young people. So welcome to everyone. And so let's begin. The format is that I have two segments of one question to each panelist, and then we have a specific question to each panelist, and then we open up for question answers. And I think that you would know of the question answer in the Zoom application. Please find the question answer box and you can start filling in as people speak. We're also alert to questions which are popping up on the chat box, but depending on the flow of questions, we may be missing some. So please alert us if we miss any questions. There are 3 or 4 of us attending to the questions which are coming in. So we hope there'll be lots of questions from you. So my first question is, they say that art is for art's sake. In the context of mental health, how do you relate to this truism? Isn't there something personal and subjective always in arts? In the healing traditions, many argue that arts are inherent to humans and to healing. We've heard about cave paintings and we've heard about storytelling. So it's something that we've done for eons. Could it mean that any pursuit of arts and creative expression has an element of self-soothing, social connection, and community building already embedded in it? So indirectly, we're asking, do you really need an arts-based therapy healing program? Because just do arts and perhaps you will be healed. So over to you, Jerry.
Thank you for that question, Bhargavi. It's an interesting question. I believe that art for art's sake is an invention, a myth that was used to liberate art from the clutches of commercialism, really, and from the clutches of meaning, in the sense that because every art project has 2 sides to it. One is the creation of it, and the second is the consumption of it. And in the consumption of it, there is often the search for meaning. What does this artwork mean? And then the most solid defense that you can construct is that the artwork means the artwork. It doesn't have any other meaning. Another way of looking at it is that the artwork means exactly what you want it to mean. It means that you and the artwork set up a response to each other. When you're talking about arts and therapy as therapeutic, I think this idea of the self-soothing, the idea of the process being more important than the product becomes important. And once one refocuses everything, one takes away the product and one looks only at the process, then you get art which is not for art's sake, but art which is for heart's sake, for your heart, for your interior, for your antara akash. That's what's being addressed with art therapy. It's not about the product. So if, say, I were leading a workshop on poetry tomorrow, I would probably focus a lot on the product. I mean, how does it look on the page? How does it sound? Is this the accuracy of it? But if one were in the middle of a therapeutic environment, one would be asking another set of questions, which would have something to do with honesty, with integrity, with how deep you wanted to go. They are very different things. So I think we need to make that distinction very clear upfront. In most arts-based endeavors, it is product that gets judged. In arts therapy, it is process that is foregrounded.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jerry, for that. And I hope it resonates with the question which came from the participants, which said, is there a distinction between art being therapeutic and art as therapy? And you have made this really important distinction right at the starting point, Jerry, between product and process. I wonder if Dr. Lakshmi, who's been with arts-based therapy and the healing sciences for many years now, would you like to come in here and take forward this conversation? So
yes,
over to you,
yes.
Dr. Lakshmi.
Yeah, thank you. I was just reflecting on the importance of process in the context of using arts-based interventions. What does it mean for a woman? I mean, in the context that we have learned, someone who cannot verbalize, someone who may have forgotten to write, someone who may have forgotten to sit in a circle, someone who may just forget to come into the room. Is that part of the process or not is something I'm reflecting upon. Am I able to participate? Can I participate by just sitting quietly and observing? Is that a process? So these are questions from a person who is recovering or in the process of, coming out of a severe mental illness, for example, a psychosis or a schizophrenic illness, and who has difficulty in expressing besides verbal, just making, creating. So here is the thing. The understanding of the learning for me was in the ABT course is that this is an alternative reality. Perhaps that's something that I assume. There are certain boundaries, there are certain ground rules, and therein comes the therapy or the intervention, if I may use a word, or some kind of a tool, perhaps, in recovery. It could be, while I provide colors, I'm not sure if I can engage with that. While you give me a pen, I'm not sure if I'm ready to write while I can write. But then I observe somebody creating. I observe somebody giving something to me, and I receive it. That is the important process in the context of being able to, relate to what's going on in the room, to sort of perhaps find something soothing, perhaps soothe others by being present. These are some things that definitely, comes into play, and it is the process. The process here, it's not the output. The process could also be that I'm just sitting and observing, vicariously learning, and I may get up and leave. But over time, I learn that we sit together, and I may choose to participate in whatever way I can. It's very interesting how I think ABT allows, it's complementary to verbal processes. So here's the thing. My understanding is therapy, while it is important, it's about talking. But can I also heal and communicate in other ways? So that is something that I'm thinking about on how it provides other ways of expression, of communicating, taking and giving. So I'll just, I think I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Lakshmi. I really like the nuance that you brought to the degree of responsibility that the therapist holds in building up this relationship through the process of engaging in the arts as a healing modality. It's already very difficult with talk, maybe less difficult if you're just dispensing medications. But in this case, to have so many nuanced questions as you have raised, I think definitely it's something that we have to talk about in terms of responsibilities and the empathy that the therapist has. In the arts-based therapy course that we run, of course, that we first focus on the self of the therapist, so that they are fully prepared to take in the process that the other is offering them in all humility and in generosity. And I think that's really something that the arts-based therapy practice has given us in the Bapu Trust, that at all times you hold that vision of being humble and also at the same time being generous and having wonder for the other's process of, for moving forward or backward or however they want to see it. So coming to you, Pattie, here you have a polarity. You have process versus product. And working in mental health advocacy, what would you favor? Do you think that process is as important for you as it is for an arts-based therapy healer or a creative writer? So what do you think about this?
I think I would go back to what both Jerry and Dr. Lakshmi have shared, which is, I think it's a bit of both. And I think, I wanted to sort of, one of the encouragements I think is also understanding perhaps, or maybe, some of the attendees here are wondering, is this something that applies to me, or would I be interested to try or learn more about using one of these methods of art therapy? And is understanding perhaps in a more formal context, which I think both Dr. Lakshmi and Jerry have covered, what the benefits are. But in a more sort of in a less formal or a little bit of an informal context, what would this look like? I'll share just a couple of examples of how we've done this less formally in our work, and particularly drawing on a method we use, which is storytelling. And the process that we have used for creating a lot of our projects has been of highlighting specific voices, which have often or traditionally been excluded from research for lots of different reasons. So, for example, we particularly focus on young people and working with young people to actually design and then implement these kinds of storytelling programs. So we use methods called, again, focusing really, I would say, on the process, but focusing on participatory research, which recognizes that a young person is an expert of their own lived experience, that they have agency to contribute, they have expertise to contribute in designing these kinds of programs. So we work with young people quite directly to identify problems and to solve problems through methods like storytelling. So to just give a very practical example, the process we follow, for instance, is we work with youth collaborators, we work with youth advisors who input even prior to the start of a program. So, how do we conceptualize something together? We work with young people to actually deliver. So, for example, through peer supporters who also have similar lived experience of mental health difficulties, with youth researchers who also have lived experience. With advocates, with a term that we use called co-designer. So these are actually the beneficiaries who would use a program like this. So working with them while it is being designed to understand, is it something that actually fits their needs? Do they like it? Are they finding it useful? And this is an approach we have used in designing a couple of projects. So one is It's Okay to Talk, which you mentioned earlier, and another one which maybe is of more interest to the audience, which is an online museum called Man Mila, where we worked with contributors over a period of between 3 to 6 months. We worked with each storyteller, where we actually worked together on writing out their story, on developing the media, on co-producing the media, and then sharing it, and also having a process of reflecting on what that sharing was like. So, there is a product, but there's also a very long process that was attached to it. So an example to share.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Patty, for that neat resolution of this polarization between process and product. And I'm sure that works a little bit in the case of, like, I'm sure Jerry enjoys the books that he produced. Those are products that he held in hand. And I'm sure that every session would give out some products that the attendees would love to carry back and put it on their wall, something like that. So yeah, so it's a mix of things. Going on to the next question. You have all used creative expression in your works, arts-based therapy with women with high psychosocial support needs, storying lived experience of young people and those who have given care to persons with psychosocial needs. Is the process, methodology, or framework needed for these kinds of initiatives and interventions? Someone has asked here, and I'm going to throw those questions in as well because it fits into this part of our conversation today. So someone would like to know whether it breaks barriers of language. Is that part of the process that it helps to break barriers of language of human communication? Does it have better mental health outcomes if you include, say, dance movement therapy in a session on talk therapy? So what are we dealing with in terms of process? Or do we leave it completely to spontaneity? I mean, no trainings needed. Let's be in the movement, in a moment. What arrives kind of experiences, leaving people with their bare experiences with no further probes, interpretations, or holding hands. What has it been like to transact between human beings in the context of mental health using arts? So shall we go the other way now? Pattie, can I invite you to respond to this?
Sure. I'll just maybe add on to what I was sharing before. I think, one of the, I think I've partially answered your question. But, one of the, I think, two challenging aspects of doing this work is that it tends to be quite iterative. So, you cannot always imagine what that end looks like. And I think there's a lot of discomfort sometimes with that process where you cannot envision the final product. There are methodologies and there are frameworks that people can rely on to, I think, reduce that discomfort when you cannot see the final outcome. But working with people to design these kinds of initiatives, where you're much more sure that it's something that they will find useful and that it's something that will most likely be more impactful. So that's one, I think, in terms of what is it like working in that process.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Pattie. Since you're working a lot with people, Dr. Lakshmi, there are many interesting questions here that you may want to address. You're also a clinical psychologist. You use talk therapy. And also you're an arts-based therapist. So do you get confused sometimes, which one to use or how do you meld and mold these things together? What happens to process? Are you sometimes, in touch with something miraculous happening, which you were not expecting? And so there you experience spontaneity and leaving it to people. How does the actual session go for you in terms of healing? How do you mix these many elements, and how do you deal with all of that? Thanks.
Thank you. There is no session that is not planned. I would say that it requires intense planning. That's what I learned. And when I did to use, it requires a lot of preparation to be able to improvise in the here and now. While it is about what arrives. Are you ready to receive it? And while I am ready to receive it as an ABT professional, I also have to be prepared to understand if others are able to receive it. Am I prepared when someone gets up annoyed and says, I'm walking out of this damn room, or is not happy with this, or the over engagement, the briskness, the communication, the activity of the games, the drums, the colors, the props, the ribbons. can be overwhelming for someone. So there is no doubt that one has to prepare. For example, to put it very simply, what is the goal of the session? Why are 10 of us sitting together for an hour and a half? What do we plan to do? So definitely we have a conversation about this. And also in the context of mental health and severe mental health, what definitely communicating with each other is difficult. So one thing it was wonderful, if I may share, I almost gave up. You see, while I was prepared, I invested in material and so on. I said, they don't give a damn, because whenever it was closer to 4:00, my room would suddenly empty. I remember speaking to Bhargavi about this sometime, and I discovered that it was tea time and everyone had to go in. And I said, oh my goodness, I realized this time works for me. It doesn't work for the people in the room. So that level of preparation is important. Certain props may be problematic. Certain games, certain stories can be difficult, and at the same time, it can bring joy. So there is an element of being aware. For example, what we would do is, this was done in Chennai. If there is, for example, a Tamil New Year coming up, so you build it up. All right. So if we were to talk about New Year, it would be boring, but you would start by, for example, I had to learn a lot of course, I know a lot of MGR, Jayalalitha, Vaijayantimala songs. So my repertoire had to increase to be prepared to deal with what came in the room. All right. So preparing for a festival, what do you eat? How did you celebrate it? What did you do as a child? What happened in the community? A lot of planning. So what is the therapeutic goal here? What is the prep? We come together as a team. We are a community. Can I come out of my room and sit for an hour and a half together as a group? Is that a goal? Is bringing joy into the room and to myself, is that allowed? Or is that not therapeutic enough? If that isn't healing, what is it? It's something, I was thinking about it. Of course, as a ABT professional, it requires a lot of patience, creativity, and improvisation. You're on your feet. You see, so definitely, Bhargavi, I think it's important to plan the entire, session, and not just walk in, but be prepared for the unexpected. Be prepared for the polyphony as open dialogue, which is a very beautiful therapeutic process. It says the polyphony is the healing. The many voices is the magic. And can I take something away from that? I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely, Dr. Lakshmi. Thank you for bringing in open dialogue. Open dialogue opens up a world of possibilities using words, whereas arts-based therapy opens up a world of possibilities and this polyphony using art forms. And what is really, there was another question here, can you really use arts-based therapy with people to help people process difficult emotions and thoughts? And you've explained that so beautifully, particularly with the kind of group that you're working with. And I believe that one thing that arts-based therapy, if the facilitator is really, in the process, very humbly and generously, as I mentioned before, is safety. When people feel safe in that environment, the arts materials that we carry with us provides that safety for them to express themselves in a way that they would not do in words. And I think this is a big positive for arts-based therapy. Jerry, do you want to come in with reflections on this?
I think the first and most important thing is that everybody in the room must come in because they want to be in there. The second important thing, I think, is you just put your finger on it, safety. And safety really means not just the therapist or the person leading the group, but everyone in the group has to be respectful. And this can be difficult because because very often when we are fragile, we armor ourselves with aggression, in the sense that we attack in order to prevent anyone from attacking us. So often, say, I remember the poetry circle, which was a group of poets, and it was not therapeutic in nature. It was simply a group of poets who met for 10 years in Bombay and listened to each other reading poetry. And in some ways, in retrospect, it was very healing, and it was also very damaging for many people, because we could often be savage with each other. And the savagery often was not occasioned only by the poetics or the aesthetics of the moment, but it was also, I think, sometimes personal. And these undercurrents, you see, I think that in a therapeutic session, we see everybody in the best possible light. When you feel that the person leading the group would be trying their best to be as accepting and open and vulnerable as possible. You see everybody as wanting to be their best person, right? But this isn't always true. Group dynamics also can become very stressful and need to be watched carefully. So this idea that you can go into any session just blind, and see what comes along is a lovely Sufi ideal, but it is completely impractical, especially when you're dealing with quantities of psychic energy that may be released. And if you do not have the training to absorb and handle those psychic energies, you may actually end up with a space that is more damaging than helpful. So I think art-based therapy is magnificent in theory, and it needs to be handled with great precision and with complete attention. I think everybody has to commit to being there and to being present and to being open. And all these things are a big ask, especially when you've come in with some kind of neurodivergence. It's a big ask. So it's really up to the person leading it to make something of that polyphony. Yeah. My great respect to people who do arts therapy, really.
Thank you so much, Jerry. I think you really touched on the core of working in art therapy sessions and in healing spaces, which mobilize the different sensory experiences. I remember one example. We were teaching rhythm in class, and there was one of our students who aspired to be an art-based therapist. And he did amazingly well, actually, in that batch. He refused to touch the drums for like several sessions, and we were wondering if it was some teaching skills that we were missing, or there was something about the drums. And so we called him aside and had a chat with him on this, and he said that it evokes the sexual abuse that he experienced with his traditional role teacher many years ago when he was a child. And for him, it was so difficult to touch the drums without having those memories evoked. Sensory experiences could be hazardous, even though we may not consider them so. And it's definitely not hunky-dory. We've experienced very, very intense moments, even in our teaching sessions, leave alone the healing sessions that we have done. And therefore, the point that you make to hold all those, not only we have to hold people's thoughts, but we have to hold their sounds, we have to hold their speech, we have to hold their voice, we have to hold their movement, we have to hold their colors. Oh my, it's a very, very dynamic situation. And that's why, Dr. Lakshmi's point is very well said. Plan. So we have plan A, plan B, plan C. So we have backup, not just for the logistics part, but for the actual things that come out, that manifest in these spaces. Is it going to be angels or is it going to be demons? You don't know. And that's what you plan for. And so this has been a most interesting session. And I have to now move on to a question for Pattie. Actually, the next question was meant for Jerry, but I would like to, because we have this question here in the chat box, which is absolutely for Pattie. This one says, let me pull this up. Yeah. How can art be used as a medium for advocacy around mental health awareness and care? All of you do advocacy work in one form or the other. So this is to you, Pattie, and I would like to add my own little twist to this, because we are working in the digital world today, and I belong to a generation where even a phone was barely available to us. And so how do you deal with this? The pandemic is the worst that could have happened to young people in this century. Other than the impending scenario of major climate change, outside of chat GPT, of course, and all that the virtual world offers today for young people, does live exchanges, sharing experiences, and other real-time human exchanges have value into the future of mental health, or will we be largely interacting as avatars advocating for mental health care? What are your views in terms of future mental health advocacy using the extraordinary creative potential and hazards of the virtual world? Over to you, Pattie.
Thanks, Bhargavi. Good question. Maybe I'll just sort of quickly touch on the digital part first. And also I think the COVID question, which comes up a lot in these discussions. So just to share, personally, I was very, very optimistic, I think prior to the pandemic, on how many opportunities the digital mental health landscape offered. But I think the pandemic really showed globally, and this is absolutely not just in countries like India, but it showed how few people are actually accessing these kinds of information, these programs, and for different reasons. And, digital mediums are not used by everyone. And one of the key challenges is around access. So, just a couple of very simple examples. Most mental health information online is in English, or it's difficult to actually search for it or find it. It features very few different kinds of voices. So, for example, it's hard to find experiences of people who have faced different kinds of marginalization, for instance. So, the access tends to be quite limited. And in a physical sense, also the access we learned is quite limited. And this brought a lot of global conversation back also to thinking, do we need to continue our efforts to either identify good hybrid models, or do we also need to continue the efforts to actually deliver programs, information, mental health support in a face-to-face format? And, just to say, for example, the area I work with is youth mental health. It was a huge challenge prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic helped highlight what some of these very specific challenges around providing mental health support were. In terms of the advocacy point, I think, I'll just share a couple of examples, but, 100%, I think, art is an absolutely fantastic medium to advocate. But I think I would go back maybe to what Jerry was saying before, and also Dr. Lakshmi, the quality of what is put together, it isn't just about, art for art's sake. I really think there's a lot of thoughtfulness that needs to go into curating. Is this kind of approach, is this piece of art, is this campaign, etc., is it going to be effective? If so, what are these essential or active ingredients that are going to make it work? How do we actually understand or map or evaluate if it's actually having that intended effect? So I think, in the same way that people plan other kinds of mental health initiatives or programs, even when you think about using art, to be very thoughtful and think carefully, it isn't just about putting on a drama, but, what are the messages in that? Who are these actors? Whose voices are being shared? Are you, trying to map out what kind of audience is coming in? What are they actually learning from what they're seeing, etc.? In terms of, these are just two examples to share where I think, the world also is at a sort of globally is at an earlier stage of thinking through formalizing art and mental health advocacy. But two examples, one, both of these are easily, if you Google them, you'll find them online. One is the program called Mindscapes, which is run by the Wellcome Trust in the UK, which is a program. It includes things like arts residencies, exhibitions in museums across the world that look at psychological well-being sort of more broadly. And for just very recently, they've had a program running in Bangalore, which might be just until last week. So it's looking at, what does mental health look like for people who live in Bangalore, for example. And another example, this is a very large collaborative effort. It's between the WHO and a few art schools in Europe and the US. It's called the Community Jameel and Cult Runners Lab. So again, worth looking up. It's the first time again that at a global level, an organization like the WHO is acting and formalizing the role of the arts in actually preventing illness and promoting health. And they have picked up a few very specific areas to work on this year. So, for example, they're looking at how music affects mothers who experience postnatal depression. They're looking at how to integrate arts-based therapies into hospitals, at how the arts can be used in dementia care, for example. So these are a few ways where art is being very specifically, very tangibly being used as part of advocacy and awareness generation efforts.
Thanks a lot, Pattie. I wonder if you'd be interested in this question, which is popped up on the Q&A segment, because you work so much with young people. Can art-based therapy be useful for children suffering from parental alienation? Would you like to respond to this, or would you like to answer live? I think this is something that...
Very briefly, I think I've put it into one of my responses though, but, I just wanted to kind of maybe just give a caveat, which maybe I should have shared earlier on. I think I have put this in for, I don't know if the responses are visible to everyone, but I'll just say it again verbally here. So there are, art in different formats when used as a mental health intervention, it's usually targeting a specific health or mental health outcome. And there are different kinds of arts-based therapies that have different modalities and different frameworks around them. So for example, there's visual art therapy, there's music therapy, dance therapy, drama therapy, and they have different approaches and outcomes depending on who is being targeted. Is it children? Is it adults? Is it people with common mental health problems, severe, serious mental illnesses? In what context is it being delivered? For example, is it in a hospital? Is it happening in a school? Is it happening in a community center, etc.? And also, again, importantly, which types of mental health problems are being addressed? It's not a blanket one-size-fits-all art therapy for all mental health problems. And the research around this is also quite specific. So there actually is quite a lot of research, I think, on arts-based therapies, including music therapy, for example, which I'm more familiar with, but also perhaps art therapy, and the effects on addressing trauma in particular. So maybe this partially answers the question. I'm not familiar with the exact research. I would need to look that up. But just to say, I think to be careful when we are referring to arts therapies, it's not a blanket across all, and different arts therapies have different kinds of results and outcomes depending on who they're being used with. So just to put that out there in case that's helpful in thinking through it in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, thanks a lot again for that caveat, Pattie, because there are art therapies and art therapies, and there are also arts therapies, which we practice in the Bapu Trust. And there are play therapies, and which are traditionally being used with children. There is drama, there is all of that. So I think it takes care of a number of questions which have come on the very specific use of arts therapies or art therapies. The best is to, if you're joining a course, then first of all, a course is needed. I think it's important that there is access to some trainings in this. That's the message that we have heard throughout this session. And then there is the need for process-oriented tools. Any tool it has a beginning and an end. It cannot be all-encompassing and solve all kinds of problems. So to become aware of the potential and hazards of each tool that is being used, I think this is so important with all tools, including arts-based therapy as a tool. So with that caveat, then, I would like to, thanks a lot, Pattie, for your detailed responses. I'd like to go now to Dr. Lakshmi, because I see here a question that is designed for Dr. Lakshmi, and if I may bring it up.
Which is the one, can it support the
No,
argument?
this one is the argument on non-medical. I feel that I should answer it.
Absolutely.
But this one, because you're so interested in policies and programs, there is this one on the by Kasturi Anil Kumar. Given the ratio of mental health professionals to people in need in India, can arts-based healing settings be created and helped by communities, non-professionals, arts-based therapists or professionals, I should say, maybe with the help of professionals to set it up. So, I am not really quite in agreement with the way the word professionals is being used in this question, but that apart, would it have any kind of an effect having such spaces outside of therapy-like settings? Yeah,
Definitely.
Now, to add to this, Dr. Lakshmi, when we were preparing for this session, we talked a lot about your interest in program and policy future for APT.
Yes.
You might also want to bring that part in over here.
Absolutely. Thank you. So here's the thing. While the idea is very exciting, very often it does not find a place in therapeutic interventions. Okay. So yes, medication is important and it has a role to play in certain kinds of mental health conditions, being tapered off X, Y, Z, and so on. But somehow group therapy is again very difficult to conduct. And my experience over the past 25 years is there's a tendency to prefer one-to-one. Groups can throw up a lot of things. All right. It requires a bit of training and also to be able to handle that, because every time it's a new group, the dynamics are different, you see. And so that is one thing. And then bringing in art-based interventions where policy is concerned, does the organization really want it? Okay. And if so, how are we going to implement it? Is there a schedule? Is there a timetable? Who will sit? Who meets the inclusion criteria to sit? Not everybody should be eligible to participate, because it can throw up, like Jerry said, sometimes it can be more problematic. It may not. So does it fit? Does it fit the person? Does a person want to be there? So these are questions. And then, can I afford the material? Do we have money? Do we have the resources? Usually not so. Okay. For example, djembes are expensive. Drums are expensive. Colors are costly. Papers. Then, well, practically speaking, as part of the course, we have learned to improvise using local material. That you can create sound, you can do things with your body, your surroundings, and so on. So that's part of the learning. How do you create using the resources you have? All right. And again, training. In fact, currently we are looking at, so what do? We sort of bring in elements of this as part of our training for community health workers. All right. So it's included in training and curriculum and mental health education, where you use arts-based pedagogy. All right. So the participants are able to experience it. If I don't experience it, I'm not going to teach. I have to feel that shift. I think we all understand that. Otherwise, it's not going to really help. So yes, for a country like India, or anywhere for that matter, people can be trained. For example, we're going to look at personal assistants and nurses who we're going to get them to experience art-based self-care for wellness, and fingers crossed, they can transfer some of these skills to the residents. So it's a big task, but one has to start. All right. So, and this for a community which has difficulty to speak, to articulate. I mean, I speak Tamil. I'm not familiar with, Hindi, for example, but I was able to do ABT with someone who spoke Assamese, someone who spoke Marathi, someone who spoke Hindi, someone who spoke Telugu. I was amazed. You know what? I'm not. It's just, it is very challenging, but you really try and understand and work with what you can. Otherwise, the in public health context, you have people coming from different regions, especially in a country of India, like India. And you may have clients or patients or what, who many have aged. They have difficulty moving. But the beauty is the diversity, the heterogeneity in the room. You see? So, I mean, these are all very exciting elements to work with. And yes, we can train, but there has to be a policy. There has to be a commitment to bring it in as part of, intervention, if I may use the word. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Lakshmi. That was very powerful. Actually, I remember when we started work in the low-income communities of Pune, we opened a clinic, mental health clinic, and we had some talk therapists operating from there. We had very few takers for that service. And then we said, what are we doing wrong? And then we went and engaged with people, how they are expressing their psychosocial distress. We heard a lot of metaphors. Some people said, ants are crawling on my skin. I have a snake curled up in my stomach. There is a big stone on my shoulders. My head is burning. So in this way, we got a lot of expressions which were not about, I'm depressed, or this is a very different kind of language that we were hearing. And I think all of us in the Asia Pacific regions do talk metaphorically when it comes to the more subtle emotions that we feel. And so we just shifted to arts-based therapy. We said if body is speaking, then we have to respond with body interventions. And that's how we got into arts-based therapy and this polyglot phenomenon that you are talking about, that you really have to bring in multiple languages, and art can do that quite in a very versatile way. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Now, my last question to Jerry, and I'm sure it's not easy, Jerry, I apologize for that. Your own experiences, your book, your continuing words about stories of mental health and giving care and support. What did you find, Jerry? Caregiving is sometimes seen as contra mental health. It's been called a burden. What motivated family members to share their experiences? Did the storying in some ways make the heart lighter? In the end, did it satisfy you in your own motivations for onboarding these personal experiences into creative expression and narratives? Over to you, Jerry.
Thank you for that question, Dr. Bhargavi, and thank you for acknowledging that it's not an easy question to answer. And so if I may, I'll use a very Indian strategy, and I'll use a metaphor. When you decide that you're going to put this down, you're going to write it, you're going to explore it, and you're exploring this with the intention of making it public. The act of writing it down can be very, very can act as a great release. The release is, however, I have to say, temporary. So imagine the metaphor is of you walking on a long trek with a very heavy backpack. And this backpack is tucking into your shoulders in some place. And so you push your fingers underneath the straps of the backpack and you ease it forward. And for a while, that part where you lifted the weight feels such a sense of release and gloriousness. And then, of course, you have to let the backpack go and rest on some other portion, which is now going to feel the strain. I think my way of saying this is that, we all deal with what we've got. And it is only in bad literature that there are epiphanic moments where healing happens and everything settles down and people live happily ever after. What I think we really need to strive for is a negotiation with our angels and our devils. Okay? Because sometimes your angels can be as disruptive to your mental health as your devils. You belong sometimes. I think that's a very standard thing that most Indians say, which is they say, you ask them what what they want, they say peace of mind, right? Peace of mind is kind of like the position of equanimity, of contentedness, of you want a flat, level plane with no abrupt jerks. You don't want any shocks. And unfortunately, that's not how it's going to be. It's never going to be that way. So you have to learn that the only thing that you're doing is constantly negotiating and constantly working with the interior self, which is why I sometimes think I encourage all my friends and my students to indulge in some form of journaling. Now, this does be only words on paper, so that's the safest. You could talk to your phone and record it. You could draw, you could paint, you could do something that expresses every day some element of the ferment that we are going through, and we are all going through it. You know, there is. I don't want to say that we all have psychological issues. There are people who have definite diagnoses. There are people who are suffering very clearly, and that must also be respected. But there is no one who goes through the day in a haze of cotton candy. We've all got these moments that we've got to deal with, and how we deal with them becomes important. And here I think the arts-based approach, where you look at what is happening, you take that material and you see what you can do with it. That's really sometimes very liberating, because you may not even be confronting it head on. You may be looking at it sideways, and that sideways gives you a certain space to witness yourself. And to witness yourself becomes a tool, because you are hearing yourself. You are giving yourself undivided attention. And that is really, really very healing also. So I think, yes, my own writing and the editing that I do, or the translations that I do. I translate Swadesh Deepak's Maine Mandu Nahi Dekha, which is a powerful book about a writer who goes through what he calls a nervous breakdown, ends up in hospital, is given multiple electric shocks, ECT therapy, and then comes out and writes about it. All this in some ways, I think has made me, I don't know if it has helped, because sometimes when you're actually doing it, when you're actually working on it, you're wondering whether it would not be better to step away from this and write about something less intense, and when it's done, it's wonderful. But when you're doing it, sometimes it can be quite dark. But the darkness is only alleviated by the knowledge that there will be light, some light.
Thanks a lot, Jerry. I think that was very inspiring and very powerful. And I do have to get this book as well. I have not seen one book. So yes. Thank you so much for sharing these with us. We still have about 25 minutes. So I would like to go back to some of the questions which have come up. Jerry, the point that you were making about electroshocks and somebody being in the hospital and all of that. So there are a couple of questions here. Well, I would love to talk about it because somebody has addressed me as well. Lived experience advocacy, why lived experience voices are important in the mental health discourse. And there was something about whether arts-based therapy can be a standalone method for working and supporting people. What I found really interesting in what you shared, Jerry, is that I forget what I had started out to say, but it had to do with something about the incomprehensibility or the ineffability of personal experiences. You can never reach there. And we all try many ways of reaching there through writing, through arts, through all of that. How do we really connect with lived experiences? Your writing is an excellent example of that. Pattie's stories about young people, carrying the lived experiences of young people's stories into advocacy. That's an excellent example of how we try to reach that dark realm. And how did it become dark? Mental health is supposed to be like, in my metaphor, it's like brilliant. Just wake up laughing, being dynamic, being able to do things. And why has mental health become such a dark topic? Is it something about the post-colonial world that we occupy? That has been my pet peeve in the mental health system and mental health work that I do here. And I do a lot of advocacy around, guys, the colonial filters have made us all dark people. Go out there and enjoy the sunlight and use arts for it. And that's why we have these institutions. There's always this hanging sword above our heads. If you're a person with a lived experience or a mental health condition or any kind of diagnosis, there's always the sword above your head that at any time your personhood can be grabbed away from you. And do you have the option to be another person by expressing yourselves in art? No, you don't. Because once you go into that dark place where I think Monday went to, then it's not going to be easy to come out of there. So can we make those spaces brighter, colorful? Let there be more music. Let there be more flowers. Let there be more birds singing. Can we make it dark? That's what. Can we make it light? That's what mental health is about. So I see that, Jerry, you want to come in here.
I think what you're saying is so beautiful, and really, it actually says something to me that we haven't said before. It seems like such a revolutionary thing, but it also seems very straightforward. That when you say mental health, almost everybody in the room has a tightening of the bowels, as if now we're going to discuss something dire and horrible and whatnot. It doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. And I think we're all on a spectrum in a certain way, and we're all fighting for personhood. I mean, the young persons who write into Pattie, most of all, because there's that amoeboid moment when before the strictures of the world form around you and say, you are now a mental health professional. This is how you must look. This is how you must behave. This is how or now you are a writer. You must behave in that way. It's that struggling that actually I feel often like telling my young students at SCM, I feel like saying, celebrate your shapelessness. Celebrate your lack of definition. Celebrate it because, as an amoeba, you can slip and slide and become who you want. And if only we could, in some ways, retain a look of wonder. When we look into ourselves, are we not seeing something that is wondrous, something that is magnificent, something that is irreplicable and not ever going to be replaced? Every detail of us is so unique. And why is it that we seem to approach mental health as if it was a hand grenade? Is it just colonial legacy? Because I think, difference in some ways was India. India was about celebrating difference, so that people who were somewhat, neurodivergent were often seen as the special children of God. They were often given a certain place in the world. Till today, I think, possession by the Devi, which can be so easily dismissed as hysteria, is actually something that allows women so much possibility for drama, so much possibility for centrality, for taking space and demanding presence. It is wonderful in a certain way that our cultures allowed for these performative aspects, which we now have to reinstate in a certain way through art-space therapy. We've got to actually bring ourselves back to ourselves by recognizing that we are performers. but we are naturally dancers and singers and creators, and that there is no need for a label. There is no need for someone to say, Bhargavi, you are a writer, so you may write. Or Jerry, you are a painter, so you may paint. We may all paint. We may all create. And in so doing so, we may reconnect with some lost parts of ourselves.
I just want to add to what, Jerry, what you're saying. For the 36 sessions, this woman who sat in the group never spoke. She would show up on time, beautifully dressed, over days, and just sit with her feet up, and she'd smile. She may or may not participate, but she attended every session, and that blew me. Is that recovery? Is that improvement? I said, yes, of course. And then she just come outside my room and just sit. Sometimes she just sit and just smile. I said, hey, this is a miracle. You see? So the point here, Jerry, is I was just thinking when you were saying, is it gloom? What is it? Is it our social media? Is it the narrative? And you bring in playfulness. It's frightening, but when we're there together, when you're with your client one-to-one or in a group, the element is play in whatever forms, but things can come up. It can blow up. Like you said, it's a grenade again. It can turn out. But we'll play and we'll see what happens. So the playfulness is a very beautiful construct to be carefully utilized. There's no pressure. There is no stress. There is no win. Everyone's a winner. We've all won. All right. So these are, I think, values that have to be communicated very subtly in the process is something. And the other thing I was thinking of, this personhood. There is a lot of personhood. This is, I must say this. It's about me, myself. I'm suffering, self-care. You see, neurotic blown out of proportion. But what about the community? What about my parents? What about my grandmother? Whom am I talking about? What about somebody in the community? You see, so that is the important thing. I would imagine that the polyphony of this medium, from me to the others and embracing it. I remember Bhargavi saying, Bhargavi, I don't know whether you remember this. I said, what goal should I'm not sure what the goal is here, therapeutic goal. And you said, it's just joy. It's celebration. I said, really? Is that a goal? Of course. And that's the tough part. You see? So I'm just thinking about just, is joy, is that a bad thing? Is that wrong? To be joyous for an hour? Is that therapy?
I love where this discussion is going because I actually feel that there is something about our training that teaches us to be suspicious of joy. I'm thinking of things like what my grandmother used to say: laugh in the morning, you'll cry by the night. It's like, when am I supposed to laugh in the night then? When am I supposed to laugh? But everyone seems to have something like that. If you start with laughter, you'll end in tears or something. It's just grim how suspicious we are as soon as we get power of joy, because joy is anarchic. Joy will just disrupt everything. It's like love. Once you open the door and let love into the room, who knows what will happen? So joy is like that, because you don't know what will happen when people are joyful.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I think that's just so fascinating to hear about happiness, joy, play, and I think that with this, perhaps the mental health narrative can change. And there are questions here in the chat box, and there's also one here. For example, there's one, I have not seen Mandu lead to more conversations about mental health. And there's a question in the chat box from our hosts who say that, is it only about your writing, Jerry, or would you take this message out, or do you take this message out into a larger awareness space, so-called? I remember also that this is where you can bring in your elements of, it's not just about arts-based therapy. It's also about eating the right thing and going for your morning walk or whatever, And so how do you spread these messages more broadly, that we are not talking about the dark part, because that's, we're talking about this brilliance and this thing that we all carry within ourselves, but which needs some release. So how do you do that? And it's the same for Dr. Lakshmi. How do you mainstream what you just said into the world at large? Do we put it in tabs, or do we allow it? What do we do?
I think you have to all remember that we are stardust, right? We are accumulations of stardust. So we are naturally luminous already, okay? And we work very hard at suppressing our luminosity, okay? Something comes along and tells us that dignity is important. Something comes along and tells us that, if you wear the right kurta and you look sort of civilized, etc., things will work. And then when we have arrived at a position at which we need rescue from ourselves, often there is a tendency in us to think of one particular element as the Messiah, right? So if I'm doing arts-based therapy, all will be well. Really not. You're going to have to use that as one of the many tools that you use to restore yourself. Because fundamentally, I believe that we are wonderful beings. We're all wonderful beings, so we distort ourselves with some help from others. Children being helpless are often distorted very badly by family members, sometimes by loving family members, sometimes by predatory family members. All that happens. It does happen. But we are luminous. So now to restore luminosity, we've got to return to the light, which means you go out and you go for a walk. You smile at people. When people smile at you, you receive that. You don't ask yourself, why are they smiling? Is there something they want? You just receive that benison of someone smiling. You eat right. You give yourself sleep. You give yourself rest. You set yourself goals. But when the goals are not achieved, set other goals. It's this terrible idea of a bucket list, right? That I must have these 500 things, and I must do skydiving in Spain, and I must run with the bulls in Pamplona, and I must explore the universe. How about walking in your neighborhood and counting the various kinds of flowers you can see? How about just stopping and engaging in a conversation with a street dog? Two simple, lovely things like that for yourself. Once a day, do something that just adds to your quota of joy. Whatever it is, privately. It's a little bit of chocolate, whatever. But if you set yourself that task, say to yourself, I'm so important that I've got to be in charge of me. And being in charge of me means I must get some rest. I must get an adequate diet. I must give up smoking if I'm smoking. Mental health and physical health and all of it is just about being gentle with who you are. Just be gentle with who you are. So gentleness requires you to turn off the lights and go to bed. Not to binge watch Netflix till 4 a.m. and then jump out of bed and try and make it through the day, right? You've got to be gentle with yourself. And then I think it might just very easily, you'll find yourself being gentle with others.
So, thanks a lot, Jerry.
Yeah.
Well, would the others, Dr. Lakshmi, Pattie, would you like to come in? Actually, there are a lot of questions in the box, but I don't know if you've seen the Q&A. I think many of us work with persons with disabilities. So many of the arts-based therapy courses, we work with the blind, we work with the deaf, we work with mobility impaired people, all of that. So any last reflections from Dr. Lakshmi and Pattie, and then we can close for the evening. It's been
I wanted to respond to what we started with about why is mental health dark? Mental health, darkness is not a bad thing, like dark chocolate, like sunset, like you need the darkness to rest, to go to bed. I look forward to, too much of light, because I live in Chennai. So it's bright and sunny, So it's like, oh my God, lovely. It's quiet, it's dark, and you just feel calm and settled. So, yes, definitely, it's important to rest. And I think, Jerry, and even just listening to what some of the things that we learned is the difficult thing is to eat sensibly, a simple meal, going for a walk, kindness. And definitely these can be therapeutic goals, but somehow it's about doing something else. But I think these are things that definitely helps people with different mental health conditions. And some of the things someone has asked, yes, you can use this in private clinics. We work in public health contexts, like for example, the way Bhargavi also does. I mean, we've learned how you can use it in very under-resourced settings. We use it in our rural mental health clinics. We sit with the clients. We've had sessions with the caregivers, with families in the OP settings. There's a buzz. It's noisy. You work a little bit. You move away. You try. And the idea of mental health and stigma we all know about. So when you bring in elements of a multimodal expression, you can definitely discuss what is depression, what are the signs, what does one do, how do you recognize, sliding, So it has a lot of potential for a conversation. So you would use it in conjunction with a dialogue, one-to-one or in a group setting. I mean, I'm just looking at some of the, and we can use it for elders. We use it for elders. Very, very helpful. Elders who have difficulty with mobility and so on. So, coloring and so on are very popular. And some of the principles of open dialogue, I was reflecting after doing the course. It's about, building social networks, tolerance of uncertainty. You see, the open dialogue is what pops up. So again, the playfulness is also to be able to reckon what can happen in the room. I think these are some elements which sort of come together in the ABT process. And of course, being flexible. Flexibility is a value by the ABT practitioner. And in some way, I think the group learns these ideas. So I think there's some amount of learning and co-learning. We're all learning, you see. So I think that's...
Thanks a lot.
That's
Thank you
what
so
I
much.
would say.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Lakshmi. So coming to Pattie, are there any last reflections that you would like to leave the audience with? Anything that you'd like to add to this discussion?
I think just an encouragement that, you do not need to have any sort of expert skills or experience in art or in writing to express yourself. And, people of any age can benefit. You could be very, very young. It could be from an elderly parent or a family member. And different people have different experiences of these different arts and creative therapies. But, you can generally expect to feel more connected to other people, to feel like it's a means of processing complicated thoughts or feelings, and to just communicate something that maybe is just difficult to put into words. And the final encouragement, because we work a lot in storytelling, if you feel ready, if you feel safe, I'd highly encourage that you do express that, whether you choose to share it with somebody else or not. But just that act of expression, it can have a profound impact on you. And if you choose to share, it can have, quite a profound impact on other people as well.
Thanks a lot for sharing with us in a nutshell, Pattie, some of the concerns that people have expressed in the chat box about, are there really mental health outcomes? We've been in Bapu Trust using mental health, ABT in the context of mental health since 2006. Many of our reports are out there on the website of the Bapu Foundation. And we continue to find it, it miraculous in terms of not the global changes that a person can manifest, but all the little changes that informs us and that makes us who we are in our journey of life, in our wheel of life. So thanks a lot to all the speakers. I think we have now a mosaic. We said, okay, arts-based therapy or art-based therapy. Is it one thing or many things? It doesn't look like it's one thing. It's a mosaic. It's a mosaic of tools, of methods, of processes, of varieties of people, and and of course products which may come out of these. And we did in the prep meeting talk about the political economy of arts, but we are not going there today. That's a conversation for another meeting some other time. It's been most fascinating to spend this evening with all of you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lakshmi, Pattie, and Jerry, for being with us. And thanks to the hosts, Asia Society. And it's been a real pleasure to know about this particular series of talks on mental health. It's an honor to be a part of this. So Ma'am Firoza Godrej, Ketki, and Ishani, and others, Shreya, for all the support that you have brought to this session, for all the back-end thinking that has gone into the making of this session. So we thank you so much for this. So we say goodbye now and we close the session.
But not before we say thank you, Bhargavi, for guiding us through this session.
Yeah, thank you so much. Absolutely.